Good afternoon, everybody. Good morning, depending on where you are from around the world. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to attend into our session this morning. And as you can see, this morning we're going to have a talk, a dialogue, some information about criminals and what they're doing, how they're just wreaking havoc on our digital society with artificial intelligence. And so with me this morning, I have Dr. Burrell and I have Dr. and I'm going to try to get this right, Dr. Ann Raghuram joining us this morning on the call. So if you got, we'll be talking. We're going to try to narrate this and get through it. So at the end, we can have questions to answer, and because we want to make sure we take time to answer your questions for attending our session this morning. So thank you. So some of the things we're going to talk about this morning, we're going to talk about defining artificial intelligence. We're going to talk about it being a double-edged sword. We're going to get into artificial intelligence and cybercrime, and we're going to talk about how the cost of it really is and the implications of it. We're going to talk about the types of cybercrime, and we're going to talk about how AI is empowering and enabling things like cybercrime, social media, and some of the other technologies that's really basing and expanding themselves based on technology. We're going to talk about some ways to mitigate it, and then we're going to get into ethics, and then we're going to close out and get into the question and answer session. Like always, most people know me when I give these kind of talks. I love to start with a quote and just very quickly. This quote is: "The same technology that now powers our daily lives can also be weaponized by cybercriminals." And so that is a quote that I found online when I was researching this. So, and this is so true, and we're going to talk about that. So, believe it or not, when we talk about artificial intelligence, even with this boom we've seen with artificial intelligence and some of the things that's going on with these large language models, there still is no universal definition for artificial intelligence. However, for the sake of this discussion, when we talk about artificial intelligence, we're going to talk about it in the aspect of the fusions of technology, computers, data, instructions to execute particular tasks that typically demand human intelligence and reasoning, learning, decision making, and problem solving. So that's the definition that we use to base this discussion around. So when we talk about artificial intelligence, man, just since November last year when ChatGPT came out, we saw some of the things that we were able to do with large language models. But one of the things that we also seen is that there's a lot of good intentions and a lot of good coming out of the use of artificial intelligence. But on the flip side of that coin, or in this case, on the other edge of that sword, there's some nefarious things that are happening with the use of technology. And so this is with any piece of technology that that's integrated into society, especially a digital society. Most of us are looking for the good, to leverage it from the good aspects of it. But there's always those few who are looking to leverage it in a nefarious or malicious way to do harm to others. And so we have to be, when we talk about artificial intelligence, we can't talk about it from a one-dimensional aspect. We also have to be very cognizant of the ugly side of artificial intelligence, what we call here the bad side. So we have to think of artificial intelligence from two dimensions. And so the thing that we need to talk about around artificial intelligence is that it's not new. It's been around since the 1950s. However, over the course of, through several decades, it's been ramping up to the point to now where we've seen these cataclysmic implications around ChatGPT, and there's been a slew of other large language models doing things and different variations of AI that's coming to bear for us. And we're really enjoying those things. Even as a researcher, we're beginning to see how large language models and artificial intelligence is beginning to shape what we do from an intelligence perspective and give us more accessibility. And not just give us accessibility, now we're beginning to see some of the linkage of how artificial intelligence is enabling research for us. But the thing that we really have to take into account, though, is that AI doesn't necessarily just enable us; it also enables cyber criminals. And not only does it enable them to inflict pain and just nefarious things on us, but it also gives them the ability to optimize their profit very swiftly. And they have developed business models around the use of artificial intelligence, and they're able to minimize detection risk. And so now that they're able to operate, more swiftly, more capably than ever before, we have to change law enforcement implications around this so that we can have better policies around pursuing cyber criminals, even though they try to remain anonymous. we're going to have to do a little more work with law enforcement to make sure we're enriching those capabilities so that we can pursue these criminals when they do things on the digital side of the house. And so one reputable industry organization said that there's been a 135 increase in social engineering attacks using generative AI. I don't know about you all. I see these on a daily basis. And to be honest with you, I was on my way home the other night, and I was waiting on a package that I was coming from FedEx. And I got this thing I got a text message that said, please click on the link to provide the address, the remainder of the address to receive the package. The one thing that caught me is that I always say pause before you respond to these things. And then the one thing that caught me, I knew my package was coming FedEx. And I'd already received a notification that my package was en route to FedEx. And the text message I received were from the U.S. Postal Service, right? And we see these things on a daily basis and how they impact us. The other thing that AI enables all of us to do is to be able to operate at speed and scale. Those are tangible things that AI brings to the table, but not only for us. Remember, we're dealing with a double-edged sword, so it increases the speed and scale of malicious threat actors as well. And cybercrime continues to wreak havoc through a continuum of disruptiveness, geopolitical interplay, outmaneuvering traditional security practices. All these things come into play when we talk about cybercrime. Now, before we had the digital spirit we know it today, we had things like fraud, we had all kind of other malicious activities going on. But now when we can do it in the digital sphere, it makes it a little more compounded because the malicious actor can touch you digitally in ways that they had to touch you physically in the past in order for them to defraud you in some way or another, right? And so the internet makes it a little more different. That dimension is a little more different than what we saw in the past and physically. And the last point I make here is that cybercrime is evolving faster than organizations can engineer solutions. And we'll talk about that later on, why that's happening and why this is an advantage for cybercriminals. And this is we're not even talking about just the artificial intelligence aspect. We're just talking about basically here. But now when you add the artificial intelligence aspect, now it's compounded and it has a far-reaching and greater capability to be a lot more effective than we can engineer solutions to mitigate some of the tactics and techniques and procedures that we are seeing from cybercriminals. Similarly, what we saw with cybercrime or with artificial intelligence in the research, there really is no, universal definition of cybercrime. And this has been this way for a long time. And I believe one of the reasons why we don't have a universal definition of cybercrime is because the digital spirit itself keeps evolving. Now it's evolving in so many ways from a technological aspect that we kind of like chasing it to really define what cybercrime is. Though, however, I do really appreciate the researchers who will go out on a limb and say, this is how I'm going to define cybercrime. And we have a couple of definitions here as any crime that is facilitated or committed using a computer network and hardware device. I really think this is a very simplistic, straightforward definition of really understanding cybercrime. I also have an appreciation for the next definition by Loder and Thomas. They define cybercrime as computer-related activity or operations that are legal, illicit by specific stakeholders conducted via electronic systems. Now, I say that to say this. What about nation states? It's kind of like asking a question, right? What about nation states who engage in nefarious activities against other governments, other countries, peoples, and organizations, right? We know there are nation states out there engaging in that. And a lot of times, how does cybercrime apply to nation states and nation states that leverage cybercrime to wreak havoc on other nation states? Is that lawful, or no? Do we have policies in place against that? I know we have organizations in place that got policies around that, but some of these policies don't have teeth to really hold these countries or these nation states accountable, right? Well, according to Morgan here, he said when we look at cybercrime, we got to look more than just beyond the cybercrime activity itself. We have to look at the damage, the destruction, the stolen money, the loss of productivity, the loss of reputation, and the intellectual property, embezzlement, fraud, post-attack. These are things that our companies are dealing with after they're dealing with a data breach or cyber attack or some other security incident that they went through at the hands of cybercrime or cyber criminals, right? And so I really like the way her, Morgan said cybercrime needs to include this because this is the aftermath of dealing with that security incident that now they have to clean up. And the last part here was this statement they made. The reputational harm is really embarrassing. And as a consumer, as an end user, a lot of us, when we hear some of our favorite companies or organizations that endured or that went through a cybersecurity incident, it makes us really think. How do I feel about the organization? But I think the more we live in this digital realm and this contemporary, from a contemporary aspect, it's becoming the norm. Even though it's becoming the norm, it doesn't make it right. It doesn't make the cybercrime right. And so the other thing that we missing when it comes to cybercrime, the global standards, the policies, the rules are totally different. Like the way, for instance, the way how the U.S. government and how we handle ourselves when we're leveraging cybersecurity as a weapon is totally different than how other countries handle themselves when they're handling offensive cybersecurity as a weapon or as a means to national intelligence or national security. There's a lot of rules around it. And so we follow a lot of rules and we pride ourselves on following rules and standards and making sure we're doing it rightfully under the guidelines set forth by our government. And this is why it makes it very difficult to prosecute criminals. We wrote an earlier paper around business crime, cybersecurity as a sustained business. It's not that we wrote the paper to say cybercrime is a way to go. We wrote it because it is a sustained business. And one of the reasons it's a sustained business is because it's very difficult to prosecute the cybercriminals. Because different laws in different states and different countries, makes it very difficult to prosecute these individuals. And the other thing we have to realize too is all the rules and statutes and legislations that we have in place. If you allow a law-abiding citizen, you're going to continue to abide by the laws. But if you're a cyber criminal, you're not going to play by the rules. And they don't care about playing by the rules. And in fact, a lot of them know the rules so well, they will find back doors and gaps and loops in policies and laws to inflict their damage on other people. In some cases, they just totally disregard it. And I think we have to really show a level of appreciation for cybercrime, and not in a positive way. We have to realize that it's here to stay. And it's been here to stay for several years now. And as we can see here, cybercrime is seen as a significant threat for our organizations. Not just our organizations, but for our governments and also for us as individuals. Because a lot of us rely on that digital, living in the digital society right now, like we're doing right now. We're coming to some of you virtually right now from all over the world. We're coming together for this session. And so we are part of that digital spirit. Just because we're here, we pose a risk because we're on the internet. And anybody on the internet can see themselves as being a target of some sort. Cybercriminals have a global reach. The more we build and the more we become interconnected and the more we leverage digital platforms, the more we become a risk and we become a potential target for cybercriminals. The effect of cybercrime is more than just the economic embarrassment that our companies and us as individuals and our governments go through. It also reduces the trust that we have in those organizations. It makes us question, are we doing it right? What we can do different? These things are good, but it's a different mindset when you're coming from it after you've been victimized, right? And so the damage of the reputation to our public and private service providers, this is huge. Think about, Microsoft. Think about Amazon. Think about some of the ones all over the world who undergoes these type of treatments and who are attacked every day. It's not like these companies say, I'm gonna get up today and we're gonna be attacked. They're working hard. Their cybersecurity professionals are working really hard. Their cybersecurity policy analysts are working very hard to make sure they're covering down on the gaps in their organization. But again, we're actually shooting at a moving target, and as some people always say, we're trying to fly the plane as we build it, and we are, because cybersecurity threat is an evolving landscape and ecosystem that never stops. When we think we got something showing up over here, next thing we know, we got a gas wound over here, and that's what our companies are up against. And this is why the cyber criminals, they have the technological, the strategic advantage over our organizations, because a lot of our organizations are only playing defense. They they don't get they get very, very, very little opportunity to do anything active, and so they don't get the full extent of open up their offensive playbook. That's against the law. So again, they can only play defense. But when we look at the cost of cybercrime across the world, I think this is a great slide that captures us to show us where we are in terms of cybercrime. And I also will say this: this only reflects the cybercrime that's reported. I believe there's a significant amount of cybercrime that's not reported. People do not come, people and organizations and governments do not openly come out and say they've been attacked, because this is such a heavy burden to say you've been attacked. And so what we're looking at here is an estimated cost of cybercrime from 2017 to 2028. Now, we look at 2023, 2024, where we are, and look, this number, this graph here reflects an increasing trajectory every year. And so far, the forecasting done by researchers has been right on, right on. And so this shows you that the pace of cybercrime is not slowing down. In fact, it's increasing. But let's look at it from another perspective. Let's look at it from a perspective compared to the GDPs. So we can see that we got the United States with our GDP at 25.5 trillion. Next, we have China at 18 trillion. Now, let's look at the gap. That bar with the star beside it represents cybercrime if it was a GDP. And look at the numbers we can play with. Even if we start reporting from 2021 all the way to 2028, it will be the third largest GDP in the world if cybercrime was a country. And so this should get all of our attention, that the cost of cybercrime as it relates to the GDP. We're talking trillions of dollars. Imagine if we were able, as a global economy, we were able to take this money and reinvest it into something else, another global society need. We will be able to advance and help a lot of people. But instead, companies are paying this money out, and this money is going in the hands of people who are ripping off our companies, our government, and us as individuals, and through cybercrime. And so when we talk about cybercrime, what are we talking about? So here's a list of cybercrime. Now, this is what some of the latest research is saying, but I will tell you this list is not a complete list, right? What we're seeing from the cybersecurity side of the house, we're seeing this list evolve. And what we're trying to do is make sure that we're able to see the activity and align the activity to something that's already listed here. But this is going to continue to evolve. Phishing, identity theft, child pornography, cyber grooming, copyrights violation. You look at the list. It's a very, I think it's a very extensive list. Financial theft, cyber stalking, business email compromise. These are things that a lot of us see every day. We deal with, especially from a business email compromise. We get so many emails at work. Now, a lot of us are really concerned. We have to pay attention to what we get in at work. It requires a lot of thought. It requires you to make sure you're cognitively engaged with what you're reading at work, to make sure you're not reading a phishing attempt or you're reading some other type of scam that's coming to you digitally, that you want to make sure that you don't endanger your company because of the types of cybercrime is very progressive these days. So all of us, we're on the same team here. So we all, this is all of our brief. This is all of us together. So if you got other people, are you saying there's other people that's going to present behind us? If so, just let me know. And so the distribution of cyber attacks across the worldwide industries, as you can look, the one thing I would ask you to do is think of your critical infrastructures from seeing this list. So think about when I look at this list, I'm always thinking about the energy sector, right? We know that our energy sector is always under attack. You know, we look at our financial institutions, they are always under attack. Okay. And so when we look at the education, you know, our education sector is always under attack. Some might be asking why is our education sector always under attack? One, because our research institutions have access to grants, they have partnerships with the intelligence community, with the federal agencies, they have classified work going on. And not only that, but think of your large institutions, like some of the institutions with 20 or 30,000 students. Those students might be students today, but let's say in 3 or 4 years, they're going to graduate. They're going to go on to have, you know, very lucrative careers, a lot of them. And so guess what? If you can get their personal identifiable information now and hold on to it for 3 or 5 years, you're sitting on a target, a lot of target rich information there. So we'll keep it. You got to think about those things and how they impact the institutions. And so, but as we talk about AI and how this all comes together and how it enables cybercrime, it's very difficult to turn on any type of news media and not see something related to AI or some type of cyber criminal activity going on. And so now we talk about cybercrime, which is already progressive, already advanced, and now we add AI as a tool to enable that. It's going to make it a lot more advanced. So this is just a recent headline. We talk about the Worm GPT, a new tool that allows cyber criminals to launch sophisticated cyber attacks. This is not what we really want to hear, or this is not even what we need, but this is what we're dealing with. And so now we got more and more organizations talking about how to navigate the AI frontier for cybercrimes, evolution, and defense strategies. And so when we get into AI-powered cybercrime, this is what we have. We have AI capabilities that are manifesting itself inside of the activities that cyber criminals are using. And so cyber criminals are able to scale and analyze vast amounts of data for vulnerabilities. So imagine that when they get inside of your networks, they're able to use AI to determine what your vulnerabilities are based on some of your data and based on some of your the way that your network is developed, or even looking at some of your compensating controls. And so this is why AI-powered cybercrime is going to continue to wreak havoc on us, because it's providing that scale and that speed that we talked about earlier. It also enables cyber criminals to identify high-value targets for more precise and more lucrative attacks. And so what do we mean by more precise and more lucrative attacks? For instance, one of the things that we're beginning to see in the cybersecurity space right now, we're beginning to see executives not only targeted at work, executives are now also being targeted at home and on their personal digital infrastructure. And so imagine that if you can attack executives at home, you can take that the information you gather from home and apply that towards attacking them at work. And so now executives are going to have to be wrapped up inside of the organization's security infrastructure, where now their personal information and assets and resources are going to have to extend and be added into the company's cybersecurity strategies. And so AI uncovers system vulnerabilities for precise exploitation. This is when I read this, I instantly thought about when I worked in cybersecurity and the financial sector, how large organizations have large vulnerabilities and they have large vulnerability programs, and all of these vulnerabilities are not high or medium, some of them are low, but it still doesn't matter, because you can attack several low vulnerabilities and create new vulnerabilities. You can also leverage vulnerability training, which is another way to attack an organization on 2 or 3 fronts. And so this is going to be much more challenging for cybersecurity teams to get their hands around. And so AI-powered cybercrime is definitely going to challenge the status quo of our organizations. And so we can think about some of our nation states. We're seeing this right now. This is not new. We can talk about China. We can talk about Russia and some of the things that they're doing and how they're leveraging AI hacking and to forge their AI cyber fight. And so again, as these countries continue to develop the cyber capabilities, a lot of these countries have no regard for the policies that we have in this country, because from a global front, we lack policies that to really hold countries in check for leveraging cyber fighting and AI hacking outside of the scope of national security. But that's a whole nother conversation for a whole nother day, is that how do you hold these countries in check when they're doing what they're doing in interest of national security, right? But I think it goes to a different degree when you start attacking individuals, how you attacking them, where you're attacking them. These things come to bear to help really determine the intent of what some of these countries are really doing. So AI's got a growing role in disinformation by state-backed groups. We saw this early on. We saw this during COVID, right? Even with COVID, AI was so effective in showing how some of the research that the government was trying to put out about COVID. A lot of people didn't buy into the research from the government, even when the scientists was doing their best to explain it in even basic terms of how COVID is this, what it's capable of doing. There was a lot of disinformation pushing that, refuting that information, causing a lot of dissension amongst the people and the citizens of different countries. And so it just caused a big problem. So we know that disinformation can be used. We know disinformation can be political, can be weaponized by politicians or whoever to also cause dissensions for whatever be between two different groups. And now when we look at other things that AI powered, like techniques, now we got deep fakes, voice cloning, and disinformation. I attended a conference last week, and one of the panelists was a researcher, an AI researcher, and he said in order for someone to develop a deep fake, they only need 3 seconds of video. Only 3 seconds of video. He said the more video they have, the longer they can optimize the video, the deep fake. So with 3 seconds, someone can develop a deep fake of your voice if that mimic you, and that's nerve-wracking to me. That makes me nervous, because I do have a lot of videos out there, and man, I can never imagine the day I have to come in and fight a deep fake. This is something that a lot of people are having to do now, because someone has took their information and developed a deep fake. So voice cloning and disinformation box, these are techniques that's been enhanced by AI. And so now, from a cybersecurity perspective, the one thing that we really have to fight and ensure is how authentic can we prove that it's authentic or it's not authentic. So that's the fight that we're really going to have to grapple with in the future. Is about approving if things are real or not through authentication. And the confirmed use of AI and manipulating, we talked about this during COVID. It was a big fight. It was a big fight, and a lot of us experienced that firsthand. So now we can actually see the power of AI. And so when we look at some other things, we can look at AI-driven cyber attacks are increasing, like the WannaCry, right? When we look at WannaCry, just look at some very simple numbers here. 200,000 computers impacted in 150 countries. AI powered, right? And this thing wreaked havoc rather quickly on us. And it caused a lot of people. I remember being working in the national security circle when this went down, and it caused a lot. I spent a lot of time looking at this and trying to find ways to make sure that we was able to contain this one when it was going down. The other thing that really gets me a little nervous here is AI-infused malware. The last statistic that I saw on malware was that there are 430,000 variants of malware created daily. I think that number is probably a little on the low side. I think it's much larger than that. But now with the AI, they can create AI-infused malware rather quickly, even with people with low coding skills or no coding ability whatsoever, right? And so that's very concerning. And that is why, another reason why cybercriminals have the strategic advantage on us right now. And so they could, they could covertly collect data and analyze user behavior. I know a lot of us are really concerned with user behavior, trying to capture user behavior to keep us safe. And we all see this. I see it a lot with my banks. Sometimes I get indications somebody's trying to purchase something here, and my bank flags it and reach out to me. I really appreciate that. But imagine if cyber criminals can use AI to spoil that data, to infect that data so that data is no longer true. That means that the bank's user behavior capabilities and analytics are no longer true. And they won't trust it. So again, this is more than about just understanding what the cyber criminals doing. Now the question begs, what are we doing to protect those critical infrastructures inside the bank from AI, from being infused and with the data, basically infecting the data, right? This is something else we've seen here. AI and social media engineering. We saw this again. I like to talk about what we saw during COVID because it's very, very recent, and most of us saw it very firsthand. How a lot of things were passed back and forth through social media. It wasn't necessarily true, but it was also how we saw how different parties, different individuals were leveraging AI. And so the key developments here is that highly realistic deep fakes, um, deceptive websites. Um, we see this on a daily basis. People build these deceptive websites because a lot of us are really busy trying to get our work done during the day. We might type a website name in wrong, and guess what? Somebody's already purchased that website with the wrong spelling, and it becomes one of these deceptive websites where people go and put their information in. They counterfeit their social media profiles, and the other thing we got to look at is AI-driven scam bots. How do we deal with that? Sometimes when I call into my banks or when I call into some organization that I'm doing business with, I'm concerned about that. And a lot of times I will hit zero or get to a point to where I can talk to a person because I don't really want to start putting information or discussing anything with a bot because I'm not really sure. I don't really trust it yet. So we get in there though. And AI involving malware that bypasses automated defenses. We've seen this, and we still seeing it today, where the signatures, the AI is able to create malware that's polymorphic. Every time it hit a defense or hit something, it totally changes itself and it looks different. So it gets past the signatures that we have in place as that creates our automated defenses. And when we talk about the bots here, we talk about AI bots, automated targeting phishing attacks, analyze social media and online data. So imagine bots that can pull your profile from the internet. And once it pulls your profile from the internet, we can weaponize something against you to speak against you that could do harm to you. We've seen this is done all the time, especially with celebrities, right? I mean, this is not something that the average person has the economic prowess to fight back with. But this is something that's happening to them. Boost user engagement and likelihood. Yes, we already talked about our AI-driven DDoS attack, generate massive amounts of traffic to prevent a network from performing. It gets caught up in trying to process that traffic, and guess what? The rest of the network is unable to do what it needs to do because all the resources tied to right there, they're trying to mitigate the DDoS attack, which you can't, right? Disinformation bots, spread fake news on platform, erode public trust. I think the last point on this slide here is the most important one. Mislead younger users struggling with source credibility. We see this a lot, especially some of those of us that's in the classroom with younger students on a daily basis. One of the things that, the younger generation, they challenge everything now, and rightfully so, because they've been exposed to disinformation and misinformation. So that even research that's been codified for years, you see the younger generation questioning it. And so it's something that we're going to have to get accustomed to because of the disinformation. But here's some things we can do and to mitigate the adverse use of AI in cybersecurity. Remember, we said it was a double-edged sword. And so how do we really balance that out? One of the things that I'm afraid that we're gonna encounter is algorithmic warfare, and that is who can develop the fastest algorithm to counter another threat. That's the organization that's gonna win. Remember, I told you that initially the cyber criminal has the advantage, but organizations can fight back. And so, but again, you have to be able to counter what they're doing rather quickly in order for you to have the advantage to protect your organization. And so we got predictive analysis. Predictive analytics. AI was a tool for predicting cyber threat. Organizations can use AI to determine, where can I see unusual activity? Where can I see something going wrong? You know my vulnerabilities. Tell me what my vulnerabilities are so I can put compensating controls or I can throw resources at that problem to show off that weakness. And so this is what AI can do in terms of predictive analytics. And the other one we have is the zero trust model. Even though zero trust is a concept, I do believe there's some good uses out of it, and especially around the continual scrutiny of network traffic and applications. And then I think the other one we can look at too is ensure non-malicious activity. This is going to be very difficult to do because one of the things we have to remember, cyber criminals don't always break in. Sometimes they log in, right? So once they get other people's credentials, they log in, become an individual. And so that's why we have things like multi-factor authentication. We have endpoint protections in place. But again, those things are controls or countermeasures that cyber criminals can work around. A lot of these cyber criminals are cyber criminal professional by day, cyber criminals by night, right? So we need to understand that. And then we just have a little more things here where we can start proactively detecting behavior monitoring. But this also is built on the premise of being able to protect your behavior analytic capabilities. If it gets infected or it get attacked, that information is at that point not any good to you because it's been spoiled, right? Enable real-time countermeasures against cyber attack. I think this is that's a good mitigation. And detection proficiency. Recognizes code alteration instantly. This is a big one, especially in the software engineering aspect where people have their code out there and they don't protect their code, but they can see that there's code that's been altered. This code has not been altered from a legal aspect or through the proper authorization channels. Then to put some eyes on that, put something on that to monitor and find out what happened. You got to start investigating it and identify system vulnerabilities in real time. Remember, when we talk about system vulnerability, this is a constant, it's a constant effort in motion. Because I do something over here in box A or corner A, it might impede or it might impact something in box C and box D. And so that's why we got to have that continuous monitoring, because sometimes when we make changes, we might, unintentionally create vulnerabilities elsewhere down the chain that are cascading. So we need to make sure that when we make changes that we are able to make sure we got continuous monitoring going on to see what other vulnerabilities we are creating. And that's one of the things that artificial intelligence can help organizations. And just the last point here we'll make is that when it comes to AI, ethics and AI, companies are going to work to try to improve ethics in AI. But from a threat landscape, again, cyber criminals don't care about ethics. Cyber criminals don't care about what you do and how the data appear. Cyber criminals are just trying to leverage the data, leverage your algorithms, leverage whatever they can to take advantage of your organization. So this might be when we talk about ethics, we might be talking about, how do we approach artificial intelligence in terms of cybersecurity defense differently. Maybe we can cut through some of the red tape and make sure we have our artificial intelligence and machine learning in places where we really need it, where we're the most vulnerable. And the other one I would just tell you, cyber criminal mindset.
I'm sorry for interrupting. I'm just want to make sure if the other panelists are going to have enough time, because we only have half an hour.
Ma'am, we're on the same team, ma'am.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Are the other panelists agreeing?
Yes.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're here. The final point that we'll make here is the playing field is not level. We have to make it level. And that's the final point we'll make with the presentation. And so with that, what we really want to do is get to the question and answering from the audience today.
just one context I want to make for people to really think about that Dr. Nobles has put forward and kind of put this presentation together is that, you know, a lot of these areas, when you talk about research, are emerging areas of study out there that even as much as 5 years ago, you know, there's not a lot of research done, or there's not a lot of area where you can focus on degrees. These tend to be an area where historically someone who had maybe a computer science background just began to do research on it. But now you're starting to see formal academic programs that are out there in the marketplace that actually are in exposing students to these types of things. Capital Technology University in Maryland has a, you know, PhD programs in these areas. You start to see doctors of science where people are studying this. And so what Dr. Nobles is really stressing, and all of us are trying to stress with this presentation today, is just the evolution and growth of these complex issues in ways that don't always fit in the way we've traditionally taught things around information technology. And so part of the challenge is not just how we have a discussion today and how we encourage people to think about these topics, but also our universities being responsive in terms of their curriculum to train and develop people in these fields. Because obviously there's a huge need for people out here with these expertise, but if the universities are not teaching it, you know, it presents a significant challenge as to how people develop these skills to really understand these dynamics outside of researchers that are stepping out there having those discussions.
Hey, Dr. Barrera, great point. Let me ask you one, and then since we don't have any questions coming in at this time, you know, when we look at this, we see this through a lens of, especially, you know, always through science, technology, engineering. Or there's some other disciplines out there that we don't think about that can really lend itself to helping us have a better look and understanding of cybercriminal and artificial intelligence. And so I tell you, I don't know if you all hear me, but one area where I think that we really can improve on is around the policy side of this. And I think it's gonna take a big effort in all of our federal agencies, and not just here in the United States, but across the world, especially in some of the more advanced countries who are seeing more cybersecurity attacks, and working through policies and working through different legislations and authorities so that we can really have international policy to pursue cyber criminals, especially as they continue to integrate artificial intelligence into their operations.
This is Anne, and one other topic, food for thought, I'd like to add here is our focus today has been how are cyber criminals leveraging AI from an offense standpoint, and the other side to this coin or the sword here is what about the organizational preparedness? How are organizations then either using AI or otherwise, preparing not just from a technology perspective, from a human perspective, from a people perspective, from a process perspective? What is it that we ought to be thinking of that we're not today? And like Dr. Burrow mentioned, there is not a lot of literature, there is not a lot of experience, there is not a lot of, oh, this is how it was done in this other domain, so maybe we could borrow some best practices. So I feel like there is so much richness in all of us working across domains, across professions, across academia and industry as well to come up with a consorted and a robust response so we can start to tilt this playing field just a little bit, right? We always say, well, the cyber criminals are the ones that have the advantage because, you know, they are, for one reason or another, 1 or 2 steps ahead, right? They only have to get it right one time And we on the other side of the sword, we have to get it right every single time. So something for us to think about as researchers is, from an organizational readiness and preparedness perspective, what are some out-of-the-box thinkings that we have to start to bring in to put up a more effective defense against this offense. So something for us to think about from that perspective too.
And I'm glad you said that, because I wrote a paper recently called, and I titled it offensive artificial intelligence and the threats and challenges of that. Because sometimes we get in the habit of seeing things from a one-dimensional aspect. Like we said at the beginning of the presentation, when it comes to artificial intelligence, and we have a tendency to look at leverage it from the good, but we also should not be afraid of looking at it from a nefarious side, such as the offensive use of artificial intelligence. Most of us don't have any plans of using it from an offensive perspective, but we do have people, organizations, and some nations that are using it in that aspect.
Do any of the participants today have any experience or interest perhaps, or any lines of thought or inquiry that you're considering, or maybe as a result of this conversation, there's an idea or two that has sparked? We'd love to hear from you. And please note that this is very much a social problem, in as much as it is a technical problem. And my research interests are in the field of socio-technical systems. So I like to study, as much as I am a technologist, I've grown up in engineering and I've been in the industry, now transitioned to academia. I truly do believe that technology is a means to an end, and this is no different. So in order for us to be thinking of solutions that are holistic, we do have to consider not just technology's vantage point, but the collective intelligence of everybody that is here in whatever fields that you're in, because this is such an omnipresent problem. It is all permeating, and our solutions have to be thought of that way as well. So anybody that is interested in having maybe a follow-up conversation, or maybe just want to talk through some ideas or thoughts, I'm open, and I'm looking forward to hearing from any one of you that may be interested in a follow-up conversation.
And you bring up a good point when you talk about, that this is a social problem, and this is why I think it's so important when we talk about artificial intelligence, that artificial intelligence just don't be taught in the science and engineering side of the academia curricula. That is, I think it should be taught in business schools. I think it should be taught in law schools. I think it should be taught in every domain that we can potentially teach it in, so people can have an understanding and be comfortable with it. I think a lot of people are not comfortable with artificial intelligence because they feel like they have to understand the programming and the coding behind it. But I think at the end of the day, when we look at it, it's not, everybody's not going to be a programmer. Everybody's not going to be a developer or a engineer working in engineering from an AI perspective. We also need people who are, historians, who are policy analysts, people who are going to be business executives, to understand what AI means and how you add value to the company using AI, but also how do you manage AI from a risk aspect? How do you protect it from becoming a vulnerability and a threat to your organization? And the other point I want to add here is that in our presentation, we talked about the things that we know of that's been documented, that's been codified, that's been written, right, about the capabilities of AI. I'm convinced that there are more nefarious ways that cyber criminals are using AI that we are not aware of today. And as more organizations come forward and we get a better understanding of how AI is being used as a weapon for cyber criminals, the more we're going to be able to capture that in literature. But right now, the literature around cyber criminal use of AI is not out there. It's not like we can pick up the phone and call a cyber criminal and say, hey, how do you leverage AI, right? And so the only way, a lot of times, how we really find out is through digital forensics or some incident response analysis or something of that sort. And so this is a really difficult problem to to figure out if you're on a receiving end, if you're a company that's been victimized, trying to figure out how AI was weaponized against you. Anything else from you, Dr. Burrell? Anything else from you, Dr. Roger Rajan?
This is all I have.
Me too. So thank you for the engagement from the audience, and we have a little bit more time if there are any questions that you would like to bring up or just share your points of view.
I think the key thing that's important is just to start having these discussions. I think one of the challenges out there when you come from an academic background is there's a lot of theoretical discussions that are happening, but not a lot of discussions that connect theory and organizational dynamics with real world problems. And I think the more of us that tend to be scholar practitioners, meaning we're in that scholarly world, but we're also trying to solve problems in the world of practice, I think it's critical to have research like this, where people are really saying, okay, I never thought about that, or I never connected those dots. Let me pursue that and see if I can advance that discussion. I think the whole value of a presentation like this is to help people that may be on one end or the other kind of connect the dots and bridge the divide that tends to happen sometimes between what we do in academia and what happens out there in the real world. And so hopefully all of you all that participated will find value in this, and will continue to try to look for research from all of us that we do individually and that we do also do collectively on these topics, and try to share them and advance them. Like, we never approach this like we have the silver bullet or the answer to everything. I think the whole key to being an academic researcher is it's like a big puzzle's laying on the table, and each one of us take turns putting the pieces together to complete the puzzle. And I think that's a critical and important way to look at it.
So true, Dr. Burrell. Thank you. And I mean, you hit the nail on the head about trying to really get our hands and our heads wrapped around this. And it's going to take, everybody, practitioners, researchers, academic, and better yet, students. Students understand the artificial intelligence thing way better than our generation, right? And I am excited about the generation of students we have in here, and their ability to pull up a seat and grapple with AI and use it in their coursework to really advance their studies. And the same thing is going to happen. These students are going to graduate, they're going to become engineers, and they're going to be able to help businesses advance even further than what they're able to do now, right? And so I'm excited about that. And I'm excited about anybody that want to have a conversation around the malicious use of AI, because it's just an area where we really need to understand, because right now we don't really understand it the way we need to understand it. And it's kind of like, we used to talk about, nuclear proliferation, right? Now we need to start having discussions around AI type proliferation for countries that are interested in using AI from a malicious aspect. All right, if you guys don't have anything, I don't have anything. Thank you all for attending our presentations today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.